I think being a woman in ag really can nurture your soul. Being involved with people and plants for me is just the best of both worlds. I can I can use my scientific background to explain something or to grow something or to read a water test or a soil test and help people figure out what the chemistry side of things is, or I can use um, my communication skills to relate to people and to form a friendship or a business relationship.
Welcome to the Farmhouse. I'm Stephanie Spiker.
I'm Candice Worsbowski.
And who you just heard was Sarah Mitchell. She is an industrial hemp sales specialist with King's AgriSeeds. And I feel like you guys, as our listeners, probably don't know a ton about industrial hemp.
Sarah will be talking with us a little bit about hemp, so you'll get to learn a little bit more about that topic.
Let's get to it. Let's get Sarah in here and learn all about hemp and other things.
Sarah, welcome to the Farmhouse. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
So we're going to kick things off with the same first question that we ask everyone, and that is, did you always want to work in agriculture?
Oh my goodness, no. I grew up in Wisconsin. I was not a farmer, but my dad was a farm extension agent, and I lived in the country, and I was going to get out of there as fast as I could and as hard as I could. I was going to study chemistry, and I went to visit a lab, and it was sterile, and there were bad smells and lots of black and white hardness. And I said, oh, this isn't for me. So then I said, oh, I'm going to study conservation. And that seemed like a really, really good fit. When I was a senior in high school, I had done all the right things. And my last semester in high school, I took a little greenhouse class. And that was it. I knew that I wanted to work in horticulture, actually, in a greenhouse. So despite my intentions to pursue conservation, which I did go to school in the University of Wisconsin, River Falls, it's up near Minneapolis area, for conservation, I ended up in agriculture at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, the big city, and studied agriculture there.
Nice. So, can you tell us a little bit about your job now? Because I know that you get to work directly with a variety of farmers. So tell us a little bit about your job, and then maybe also what is the best part of getting to work side by side with a lot of farmers?
Well, I work in the hemp industry. Right now, I'm working for King's AgriSeeds. We're based in Lancaster, and we are launching a new product. And really, we're at the birth of a brand new industry, which is, for me, it suits my personality perfectly, just really, really perfectly. There is a lot of investigative work that has to be done. You need to talk to a lot of people, different types of people, and I find people really interesting. I often say I don't know what I like better, people or plants. Both have advantages, and the one thing about plants is they don't talk back. So
True.
And you learn to read them and speak their language. With people, not quite so much, which of course adds to the challenge, and that's good. But you asked me about who I'm working with. I am working with farmers, and here in Lancaster, I work with all kinds of farmers. I work with Amish farmers who are using very practical type of equipment. And then I'm also working with people who have GPS equipment on their tractors and can really dial in their production systems, whose systems really require not just looking at one crop, but looking at their whole farm and how this one crop of hemp fits in with their crop rotations and their revenue. And it's I work with a lot of different farmers.
It sounds like your day to day is never the same, right? Like you're never doing the same thing every single day.
When the phone rings, I don't know who it's going to be, but I always answer it. And it's kind of funny. My husband gets more spam calls than I do, and I answer the phone every time it rings. So, but yeah, it could be someone from another state. I took a call 2 weeks ago from a person in Florida who's putting together a project on CBD across multi-states. I am working with another gentleman in another state, and he's working with 14 states trying to get hemp into all those different states. I've worked with doctors, I've worked with lawyers, I've worked with farmers, I've worked with carpenters, I've worked with real farmers, of course. And so I have to try to meet them where they're at and explain what I can do for them. But first, and I have to explain it in such a way that it meets their needs. So if I can find out what it is they're looking for, then I can figure out if it's a good fit or not.
Okay. So, like you've kind of said, you're an industrial hemp sales specialist, and that's kind of how we connected with you. For our listeners who don't know, Lancaster Farming has another podcast. It's called the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. It's hosted by our producer, Eric Herlock. And Sarah, you've been a guest on that podcast before, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I have.
If you're interested or curious about industrial hemp and how it's grown or all the cool things that people are doing with it, I highly recommend you check it out. But for you, Sarah, what got you interested in exploring and ultimately becoming a professional resource on industrial hemp?
Well, it came about kind of as a back door. I was looking for a job where I would manage a crop, and I was in the horticulture field, and I thought I would be managing, I don't know, something like petunias or New Guinea impatiens or something. But I wanted to manage a product line from start to finish. And what that means is kind of looking at the market and finding out what it needs and then delivering that product to the market. And I was just applying for jobs, and there was a job opportunity at King's AgriSeeds, and I applied for that job, which I was not chosen for. But when the owner of King's AgriSeeds, Tim Fritz, called me back, he said, we don't think it's going to work out for you in this particular role that you applied for, but would you consider working in hemp? And I said, well, what would that look like? And he said, well, things are not quite falling into place, but in a few weeks, perhaps we can talk again when I have more details. And so that was the beginning. And like I said, I enjoy a challenge, and something about what I had in my resume and my personality gave them the confidence that I could work in it, manage this product line for them. I do it with a lot of help. Don't get me wrong. The principals at King's AgriSeeds definitely steer the ship, but they give me a lot of freedom to explore this market and to find out what it is that we need. I bring them that information, try to help with that kind of factual stuff, and then they make the decision about what's needed. So yeah, I kind of fell into it. My family back in Wisconsin, they think I'm nuts working in hemp, but they think it's still a fad, but it is not, as we all know.
No, it is very much growing. And again, our hemp podcast is called the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. I recommend it because people are doing a lot of really cool stuff with hemp right now. They are using it to construct buildings and make paper bags and clothing and guitars. There are even hemp tampons coming out soon. So yeah, people should.
Oh, they're already out.
Oh, they're out
Yeah,
now? Okay.
Oh my, there's a great story that I want to tell you, because feminine products are already on the market. The story I want to tell you is I was at a trade show in North Carolina, and it was a hemp trade show. And I have never seen a group of grown men standing in front of a 500-gallon aquarium filled with tampons. They were taking selfies. and getting their pictures taken. And that was Claire Clunk's company called Trace Femcare, and she's been doing this now for years. So it's really, really wonderful that we're actually talking about feminine products
Mhm.
at an agricultural trade show.
Yeah.
Remarkable.
Yeah, it is very cool. But yes, so Eric has a whole episode featuring Claire and her hemp tampons and other products. And I listened to the whole thing. I thought it was fascinating. And I feel like pretty much any woman would probably find it fascinating.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
give it a listen. But for now, we're going to get back into our podcast at the farmhouse here. And Sarah, you mentioned that you grew up in Wisconsin, you went to University of Wisconsin, and obviously now you're here in Pennsylvania. So, in your experience, have you seen a lot of differences in agriculture in the Midwest versus here in the Mid-Atlantic?
I've been on the East Coast for a long time. My family does farm. Um, I have women have always been involved with farming, always. And the farms that I'm most familiar with are not the large corporate farms, but the family farms. So the wife or the mother, the daughters, they are milking the cows, chasing the heifer calves from the heifer barn down to the other field, or helping to hay. I've thrown a few bales of hay in my time, and that's part of why I did left Wisconsin to avoid throwing bales of hay. But it's women have always been involved with farming. I think it's very natural for people of all kinds, men or women, to grow food crops or nurture animals. I think it's really intuitive for people to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, forage and cover crops are a big part of what you guys do at King's AgriSeeds. For people who aren't familiar with forage systems or cover crops, can you explain what they are and why they're important?
I had to learn that because working in horticulture, we don't talk about forage. And I think about forage as going out in the woods and finding mushrooms
Mhm.
and berries and stuff. But a forage crop is something that feeds the animals, and it's a nutritious product. And there's a whole science behind this that I really can't explain. But I do know that King's AgriSeeds prides itself on providing a variety of different forage crops. Some of them are mixtures for the most part to feed the animals in order to increase milk production, for example, at a dairy, or to um, feed the animals different types of food that may help with weight gain if you're working with beef cattle or bison or something. So that's what a forage crop is. A cover crop may be a forage crop, but a cover crop is what is grown over the winter. And it's something that is growing. It grows in the fall, pops back up in the springtime. And that is about maintaining soil on your farm, keeping our most valuable resource
Mhm.
where it's supposed to be on the farm.
So, what does a cover crop do to preserve that soil health?
Under the surface is where everything is happening.
Mhm.
And as um, as I'm also a scientist too, so speaking about the things that we don't see, just the myriad of life that is right under our feet. And we can't always see it. I guess the obvious ones are worms and bugs. Um, but there are filaments in the ground called mycorrhiza that we may or may not see. They are working symbiotically with plant roots. They're actually assisting the plant roots with water uptake or finding different nutrients, even synthesizing some of those nutrients into a way that the crop actually benefits from. So it it's like going to a different world if you are looking at the soil, especially through a microscope. Or what I do is I have to watch and see what happens on top. So, how are these plants responding to what's going on in the ground? What did we do, the crop history, that is having an impact on the crop that we're growing right now? Those are the questions that we try to explore in order to manipulate them and provide a benefit to the crop that follows.
Great. What's the difference between four crops and cover crops? Again, for people who don't know, because I'm like you, I don't have a background in agriculture. So a lot of these things were new to me when I started working at Lancaster Farming.
A four crop is a crop that sets up the cash crop that follows. And four crop was coined by Tim Fritz, the owner at King's AgriSeeds. And we've known about impacts in crop rotations for a long time. And for example, we know this because we offer a product called Maize Pro. And Maize Pro is a multi-species cover crop that is planted in the fall, and then it's taken out in the spring, and you plant corn after it. Compared with something like winter rye, which is the most common cover crop, you can get a yield boost of about 40 bushels per acre of corn, which if you're only getting 150 bushels, that's roughly a 25% increase. If you're getting a 200 bushel per acre, that's a 20% increase. So it's really, really, it's a way of manipulating the field history in order to deliberately boost the crop that follows. So the four crop is a setup crop, and it triggers a very positive response in the crop that follows.
Great.
Yeah, that term four crop was also new to me. And so, I mean, it makes perfect sense. So that's very interesting to learn. You're always learning something here at the farmhouse.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously now you work in industrial hemp, but you have other experience throughout agriculture, one of that being greenhouse production. So I would love to hear just kind of about your experience in that field and how things have changed and evolved over the years.
Greenhouse production is really about precision. Really, really about precision. I have seen greenhouses where people sprinkle seeds on open trays and transplant these thin little seedlings with tweezers into packs or pots. And I don't think anybody does that anymore, not on any large scale. What happens now is precision sowing, where each seed is dropped into a very tiny, tiny cell the size of your pinky fingernail, and one seed per little cell. And that seed grows for maybe even just days, 14 days or 37 days. It's really down to days, even hours sometimes. And then that tray of tiny little seedlings goes through a transplanting process, and it's never handled by people. It's handled by machines. Robots take these trays and put them on a conveyor belt, and an electric photographic eye indicates where there's a plant and where there is an empty cell. And again, robotic tweezers come down and extract these little seedlings. They're only a few weeks old, and then they move them over and put them in trays, and then they're transported out to the greenhouse, again, by robots on benches. And they're watered with environmental control systems, with humidity sensors, temperature sensors, light sensors. Everything is done with electronics. And then, ultimately, we buy them at the garden center for, $5. It's really remarkable, all of the precision that is happening in the horticulture field.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I feel like a lot of people have that kind of stereotypical view of agriculture, that it's very like old school, like down on the farm, old McDonald type of thing. But that's high tech, like as high tech as it gets. So that's fascinating.
Yeah.
It's happening in agriculture too. Mm-hmm. The equipment that is available is really precision oriented. Automated driving, we're talking about looking at automated cars. That's been in agriculture for a long time. Mm-hmm. So many of the bugs that we have worked out for automatic driving started in agriculture, and that was very much a test place. And you ask about the Midwest, the difference between the Midwest and here. The Midwest is able to do that more easily because of flat farms and hundreds of acres in one field, not just small farms where we have different terrain. It's really automation. It works best when everything is the same. And that lends itself to greenhouse production and big time agriculture in the Midwest.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I'm sure, though, it's only, a matter of time before they figure out a way to tackle terrain that is not uniform. I think of those, to me, unsettling dancing robots that I think it's, is it like Boston Robotics that they have? And it's like, okay, like in, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, are we going to be seeing those kind of robots out in the fields, helping out? And it's a wild thing to think about, because I agree with you, Steph, when you think of farming, or even on a much smaller scale, gardening, you think of it as being this natural hands in the dirt kind of thing, and that is just not always the case.
Not always, no. And it is very quaint. And oftentimes you see that is the touch point for retail. Big companies, Archer Daniel Midland, they don't have anybody standing out there with overalls and a shovel.
No,
That is
I'm
high
sure.
tech. Or the cattle breeding companies, they're not standing there. Or the motto is not somebody with a cowboy hat on and a stethoscope. But yeah, intensive breeding for animals, intensive breeding in plants, all driving at a particular market. That's what's happening, and that's not recent. That's just happened over the life of agriculture.
Yeah. So I know fertilizers tend to kind of get a bad rap with consumers or just like the general public sometimes. And I don't know, it might be because of social media or just the media in general. I say that being part of the media, but it's just, it doesn't always have a positive view. So what's one thing you wish people understood more about fertilizer use?
I think of fertilizer in a negative way. The connotation that people have is it pollutes our waterways. That it's farmers are pouring fertilizer on, and it's causing nitrogen increase in the water and oxygen depletion. And it's most unfortunate because farmers don't want to lose their fertilizer. Fertilizer is expensive.
Yeah.
And so applying fertilizer is also something that's pretty complicated. And you have to understand your land, and you have to understand the rainfall that you have, and you have to understand the crop demand. So what I would like people to understand, the general public to understand about fertilizer, is just that farmers aren't pouring it on. They are really being as judicious as possible with this expensive resource in order that they use it in the right way. It's just wasteful. It's too expensive to throw away like that. So that's the main thing. When it comes to farmers, and again, I work with a lot of new people to farming and hemp, is they think that, you just put the seed out there and it'll grow. And that's also not the case. So you actually need to nurture these little plants too, so that they do what you want them to do. So what fertilizer does is fertilizer brings out the best in that crop. And it has to be used wisely, and it has to be delivered appropriately. It's like raising a family. You wouldn't just stop feeding your kids. It's a ludicrous idea. You just wouldn't do it. So why would you not feed your plants? So, and you can't eat cake every night either. So you have to be judicious about how much fertilizer to apply, and the timing and the amount, all geared towards making that crop grow to its maximum potential.
Yeah, it's definitely such a, I guess, complicated process to know how much you actually need of different things. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I was covering something for the paper, and I remember the speaker saying like, oh, a farmer sees like the soil needs nitrogen, so they think, okay, a little bit's good, but then a lot's probably better. But that's not the case. It needs a kind of specific amount. So it's very interesting science. I'm fascinated by it.
Yes, yes, indeed.
It's also one of those things that I think a lot of people outside of the agricultural sphere can, I guess, not identify with, but they can understand, because we talked to Crystal Snyder a few weeks ago, and she works
Right.
at the Penn State Floral Trials, and we were also talking about plant nutrition with her. And we both admitted that as gardeners, neither of us are great about feeding our plants. And it's something that should be so basic, but I feel like so many gardeners like us don't give a whole lot of thought to, and we really should.
It is a science, but I also know that the soil is pretty forgiving.
That's good to know.
If yes, maybe not in a pot with soilless media or peat moss and vermiculite and that kind of thing, but the soil is really pretty forgiving. Um, but you do have to take care of it.
Mhm.
And if you have things growing, back to that whole cover crop thing, if you have things growing on your garden all year, for example, if when you're done harvesting your tomatoes and your squashes, if you would plant some winter rye with some radishes, some tillage radishes, and perhaps some other kinds of mixtures, and grew that, you would have a green garden all winter here in Pennsylvania, and then in the springtime you would just be able to till that up, incorporate all those nutritious leaves back into the ground, and then plant your garden. But you still have to fertilize somewhat. You still have to fertilize. So I know that in the greenhouse business we try to make it very easy to for people to grow plants, because there's people think that they can't grow anything. We've heard about more black thumbs and green thumbs, right?
Yeah.
I would say
But
I
the
think I have a black thumb most of the time, but I try.
well, good. Keep it up, and learn to speak that language. Watch your plants and see how they change. But you do have to fertilize them. You do.
Okay. Speaking of educating the general public, what do you wish more people knew about farmers who are working towards growing industrial hemp?
Farmers who are growing industrial hemp are probably not interested in smoking it.
I mean, you're
Yeah.
joking, but like I agree. I feel like there is a lot of people who don't know the difference between hemp and marijuana. So could you do a quick, I guess, elevator pitch on what the difference is for people who might not know?
Well, the language is changing. So when we talk about cannabis, in general, we're talking about marijuana, medicinal marijuana, therapeutic cannabis, something that someone is using in order to get a physiological effect in the body, whether that's to get high or whether that's to relieve pain in the case of cancer drugs or some other things. So there's a wide application of cannabis in the health field. So that's cannabis. Then there's CBD, which is also on the edge of the therapeutic side. It is something, however, that does not create a psychoactive effect. You will not get high by taking CBD. You might feel more calm. You might feel less. You might sleep better. If you use a salve, your muscles may feel better if they've been sore. Those are the things, over-the-counter type products that CBD has. Industrial hemp, on the other hand, is used for industry. And that industry can range, like you mentioned before, anything from animal bedding, that would be kitty litter, or barn type products, chicken litter, all the way to bioplastics and microchips, with building materials, fabric, in between. Lots and lots and lots of different industrial uses, biofuels. Then the other side is the food side. And the industrial side of food is producing the seed, and the seed is rich in oils, and the oils are rich in omega-3 and omega-6. Omega-3 is the antioxidant, the cancer-fighting enzyme that we're all trying to eat more salmon and trying to eat more legumes. Well, hemp has antioxidants, omega-3 in spades in comparison to those types of foods. So the hemp seed side is really all about food and providing nutrition in a very small package. And industrial hemp farmers are growing these crops in rows, using a planter, using a tractor, harvesting with a combine, baling it up in the field, or using in a tractor, a combine with an elevator so that all that grain tumbles into a truck, loaded into storage bins. That part is traditional agriculture. And that is what industrial hemp is when people are referring to. They're thinking of a traditional farming operation.
Great. So hopefully people will start to learn the difference.
That's right. And if they want to smoke industrial hemp, it's just going to burn really fast.
And you're not going to feel anything.
So you're not going to have much fun, I don't think.
We ask everyone the same question, and we always kind of joke that we save the biggest one for last. So here we go. What does being a woman in ag mean to you?
I think being a woman in ag really can nurture your soul. Being involved with people and plants, for me, is just the best of both worlds. I can use my scientific background to explain something, or to grow something, or to read a water test or a soil test and help people figure out what the chemistry side of things is, or I can use my my communication skills to relate to people and to form a friendship or a business relationship with them. So when you said no 2 days are the same, that is exactly right. And we have to be scientists, we have to be business people, we have to be meteorologists, we have to be on the side of predicting where the markets are going to be in the future. So agriculture is really just a very broad business. And I'm not alone in that. Men face the same thing. So a traditional farmer is an engineer, a human resource agent, a check writer, bookkeeper, and sometimes she's also making dinner.
I love that.
Nice. Yeah, that's a great answer. So thank you so much, Sarah, for joining us here at the farmhouse. It was so great to have you with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
It was so nice talking with Sarah today. I feel like I learned a lot. And I feel like once again, you and I are getting some great tips and knowledge about, how we should be treating the soil in our gardens, because neither of us are farmers, but we both like to garden. So it's always great when we can take some of that knowledge from these women working in agriculture and kind of, I guess, shrink it down a little to use in our day-to-day lives.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like I do, as I said, I kind of think I might have a black thumb sometimes, but I feel like we get tips all the time on this podcast, and hopefully I can actually implement some of them.
Well, I mean, you also, I would imagine, get tips from your sister because she's a farmer, right?
Yeah, my sister's a farmer. She also majored in, oh gosh, it was such a complicated name, environmental resource management, but she specialized in soil science. And I loved what Sarah was saying about how there's so much alive, like under our feet in the soil. Mm-hmm. And it brought me back to when my sister was studying soil in college, and how even if we were just joking, she would get very upset if we called it dirt, because dirt and soil are not the same. Dirt is basically like, what you sweep up from your kitchen, right? And soil is like a living thing, and it's breathing, and it has all those organisms in it, and it's something that's very much like important and needed in our life. And so now I have become super particular about the term soil, and I blame my sister for that. But I guess that's a good thing because, as Sarah said, it's like, there's so much happening in there. It's such a cool thing.
Yeah, there are a lot worse things you could blame your sister for, I suppose. But I agree. Yeah, I find myself thinking a lot more now about what is happening under the surface when I garden. I don't have a huge vegetable garden. It's about 3 feet by 10 feet. But I find myself, maybe overthinking what I'm doing at times. I've grown snow peas in the same location in that garden for the last 4 years. And I find myself wondering, should I do some crop rotation?
Yeah.
Have I sucked out all the nutrients for my small crop of snow peas? Probably isn't a problem I need to worry about. But because I'm exposed to this kind of knowledge working here at Lancaster Farming, it is something that is in my head.
Yeah, absolutely. I would absolutely suggest a nice crop rotation, right? Maybe this year the snow peas can just move to another corner.
Well, it's too late. They're in the ground now.
All right. Next year, right? What
Yeah.
is it that our producer Eric always says that
Next year will be my best garden ever.
there it is. Always got to bring Eric back into it somehow.
Oh, he's going to be thrilled with all the shout outs this week.
Yeah, really. This is kind of the Eric Herlock episode somehow. Just kidding. It's not. It is Sarah's episode. And we are so glad that she joined us. And I think we're going to wrap it up before this does become the Eric Herlock podcast somehow. We really do genuinely appreciate all of you out there who listen every week. And if you ever want to get in touch with us, we actually do have an email. It is farmhouse@lancasterfarming.com.
Yeah, you can also hit us up on social media. Where can they find us?
We are on TikTok and Instagram as @LancasterFarming, and we're on Facebook as Lancaster Farming.
And please go ahead, if you feel so moved, to subscribe, leave us a review or a rating, 5 stars, please.
All right, I think that wraps us up. I am Stephanie.
I'm Candace.
This has been The Farmhouse, and we'll talk to you next week.
Bye.
This episode of The Farmhouse is copyright 2024 by Lancaster Farming Newspaper, part of the Steinman Communications family.
Who is written by Stephanie Spiker and Candace Wierzbowski, produced by Eric Herlock and Matt Lee. The music you've been hearing throughout the episode is courtesy of Tin Bird Shadow.